Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to discuss a national security threat that can't be addressed by traditional military power at all, and that is climate change. The unclassified worldwide threat assessment by the Director of National Intelligence said, and I'm going to quote here, global environmental and ecological degradation as well as climate change are likely to fuel competition for resources, economic distress, and social discontent through 2019 and beyond, end quote. That assessment also said, quote, damage to communication, energy, and transportation infrastructure could affect low-lying military bases, inflict economic costs, and cause human displacement and loss of life. I've asked this question to other combatant commanders, so I want to make sure that I get this on the record. General Scaparrotti and General Lyons, do you agree with the intelligence community's assessment of the climate change threat?
I do, and I believe that, as you noted, much of this will be drivers for potential conflict, or at least very difficult situations that nations have to deal with. The second, I would point you to the high north, and that's the increasing opening of the northern sea route and the challenges that presents from a security perspective.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. General Lyons, do you also agree?
Ma'am, I agree. These are sources of conflict, and we certainly have to be prepared to respond to them.
Good. Could I then ask each of you very briefly, because we have very limited time, just to describe how climate change impacts your operations in your commands and what you're doing to adapt to these changes? General Scaparrotti, would you like to start?
Well, I think the most apparent to me is the one that I noted, and that's in the Arctic. We already are seeing longer periods of time that the Northern Sea Route is open, and so as a part of that, there's an increased interest in commercial and resource capabilities there. China, for instance, is pressing to get into the high north and have some presence there, and so that creates competition. Russia, because that Northern Sea Route is the one that follows most closely to their borders, has reopened 10 of their airports there. They now have radar systems up. They've begun to move on periodic times, different weapons systems up there for control of the area. So those are all things
that's serious
that I have to bring into my planning.
So, and what has been your response to that?
Well, actually,
just briefly.
Briefly, we've changed, we've updated our plans as a result of that. We've had to change the posture of some of our forces. We've changed our operational patterns so that we, in fact, deter and we send the signal of the importance of the Arctic to us. Those are just some of the ways on day-to-day that we've made changes in our normal routine in order to demonstrate significance and capability in the Arctic.
Thank you. General Lyons?
Ma'am, anything that degrades our ability to project and sustain power globally at our time and place of choosing is a concern, and we know that we have to operate in any conditions whatsoever.
So what are you doing by way of response?
Ma'am, in other words, in our planning and so forth, we consider all environments, but more specific to General Scap's point about the more scientific piece of it is, that's a little bit out of my area of expertise.
Fair enough. I really wasn't looking for so much a scientific answer, but as General Scaparrotti said, how you have to kind of readjust where you are and what you're doing. If I can, I just want to say adapting to climate change impacts our military readiness, and I'm glad you both take this threat seriously. I appreciate that. In my remaining time, I just want to ask very briefly, if I can, about the INF Treaty. We all know this is a landmark treaty, arms control treaty with Russia, negotiated in 1987 by President Ronald Reagan. The treaty prohibits both of our countries from testing and deploying ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles with a range of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. Yes, we know that Russia is in violation of the treaty since 2014, but rather than use the mechanisms within the treaty or other tools available to us to try to get Russia back into compliance, the administration is abandoning the treaty entirely. So I just want to ask, what is our plan to prevent Russia from building more INF treaty-prohibited missiles in the absence of the treaty? Do we have a plan here? General Lyons?
I might have to defer on that. That's a little bit out of my area of expertise.
Okay. General Scaparrotti?
Well, Senator, I think that, we're still in a 6-month period here where we're looking at what our options are. We in fact, have told our allies in NATO that we will do this planning and collaboration with them. We've begun that. So I don't know that we have a plan today. I know that we're working on what we think that plan might be. I personally think that it has to be multidimensional. It has to be across all of our domains, and it has to be whole of government in order to respond to that. I would finally say that, from my point of view, that when you have a peer competitor, and particularly a modernizing one that will be challenging, such as Russia, that we should look toward treaty capabilities in order to provide, some stability, to provide signals and communications and limits that we understand, and then we can work from.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you are trying to work with our allies. I think the Polish, for example, have said that they're concerned about missiles on their land. I just urge you to think about, instead of withdrawing from the INF treaty, whether or not we should be redoubling our efforts to bring Russia back into compliance with the treaty. We know that Putin can't be trusted, but we have a responsibility to prevent a dangerous and expensive arms race in Europe. And without the treaty, I'm worried that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Senator.
I apologize for running.
Senator Tillis.